Hello, my name is Roger Watson. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Advanced Nursing. I'm the editor of Nursing Open, and I'm an editorial board member of the Wiki Journal of Medicine. In this session, I want to talk to you about a particular ethical problem that arises in publication called plagiarism. Plagiarism is quite simply taking someone else's work, using it and passing it off as if it were your own. Now, there are different cultures around the world and different approaches to plagiarism and using other people's work. In some cultures, it's considered unnecessary to cite your sources, and in other cultures, it's considered a good thing to use other people's work in this way. Unfortunately, culture simply doesn't come into it in the publication industry. If you use somebody else's work without proper acknowledgement, and it looks as if you're pretending it's your own, it's plagiarism. Plagiarism doesn't arise just in publications. It can also arise in other areas, anywhere where you can take somebody else's work and pretend it's your own. For example, in the process of writing and reviewing grant applications. If you're reviewing a grant application and you find an idea that looks good and you steal it, then put it in your own grant application and pretend it's your own, that's also plagiarism. The simple approach to plagiarism is this: don't do it. Just don't do it. And certainly don't do it deliberately. Plagiarism, if discovered, and you will be discovered, can be career-ending. And in some countries and in some jurisdictions, it can also end up in prosecution, and there are even recordings of jail sentences associated with plagiarism. So it's a very serious issue. Just don't do it. Don't ever be tempted to do it. It arises by people doing it deliberately, people who really don't care much about ethics. That's just wrong. Some people do it out of desperation. They can't think how to write something or to say something, or they're desperate for a publication. They find someone else's work and they use it carelessly. They don't really mean to do anything wrong. They just are desperate to get something into publication, and they do it, but it's still wrong. You'll still get caught. Please don't do that either. Now, most academic publication is done in English, and this does arise when people are unable to express themselves properly in English if they're writing in English as a second language. However, it is still no excuse. You can't do it. You must find ways of avoiding it. I'll come to that later. There's also an issue of self-plagiarism, sometimes called duplication. This is a grey area, and you certainly can't wholesale plagiarise yourself. You can't write one article and then rewrite it and pass it off without special permission from publishers in another journal. You have to be very careful about duplication. However, self-plagiarism often arises in research publications in the methods section, where several similar studies have been done, or one big study has been done and it's being published in several parts. The methods remain the same, and it is admittedly quite difficult to reword. Now, you should make every effort that you can to reword and not be accused, if possible, of self-plagiarism. But the Committee on Publication Ethics has advised editors and publishers to be slightly more lenient about this. So that's not an excuse to go and self-plagiarise, but don't worry so much about methods sections, but certainly don't self-plagiarise in other sections of a paper, because that's just considered duplication, and that is an ethical problem. Now, as I've said, don't plagiarise deliberately. Sometimes it arises, I suppose you could say, accidentally, where people don't mean to do it, but they do it out of desperation. And as I've already said, a key area where this happens is writing in English as a second language. Again, there's no excuse. You mustn't do it. If you need to write English and you need to find a way of expressing something, find someone whose first language is English and ask them for help. Translators are good, but they're often not able to write English in the way it should be used, and translators have also been known to take passages and plagiarize them. You should really try and get as much help as you can. Don't do it. Don't think that you'll get away with it. Don't think that you'll be excused. You may well be caught. Now, if you're caught at the stage of submitting a paper, it may not be fatal either to the paper or indeed to your career, because that will be detected in the process of submitting the paper, and you will, if it's small, minor, and looks excusable as it were, then you may well get a chance to amend the paper before it goes for subsequent review. Publishers will detect this, and all the leading publishers use similarity detecting software. A common package is Authenticate, and the journals that I edit for Wiley use Authenticate. This gives the editor a report of the extent of similarity in an article, and we're always advised then to read the article and check the similarity report. We don't work to percentages. We don't say if it's 10% similar or 20% similar, then it's not being published. It can be very similar, but arising from lots of small pieces of similarity, or it could only be maybe 5 to 10% similar, but that could be one particular paragraph taken from another source. So as I emphasize, if you plagiarize at the submitting process for a manuscript, you will be found out. But what you want to avoid, and what we desperately want to avoid as editors and publishers, is plagiarism being detected after an article is published. That's a wholly different matter, and as I've already said, can lead to very serious, even career-ending consequences. If you want to look at the extent of plagiarism and the extent to which articles have to be retracted on that basis, I'd strongly advise you to register with Retraction Watch. It's a website where the reasons for retraction of papers is studied, and you can receive a daily email from them, and I think you'll be quite shocked at the extent of plagiarism and other ethical problems that are picked up on the Retraction website. If you want to know more about what plagiarism is, how to avoid it, and how we as editors and publishers deal with it if we find it, please check the COPE website, the Committee on Publication Ethics. So just to recap, plagiarism is using somebody else's work and pretending it's your own. Don't do it. Try to avoid it if at all possible. Always seek help from somebody else. If you're writing in a second language and you just can't express something, don't be tempted to steal something from another source. And whatever sources you use, and from whatever culture you're writing, you must quote them properly. That's the way to avoid plagiarism. You may well want to rephrase something, but you should still acknowledge the source. So I hope that's been helpful, and thank you very much for listening.